Oh, great. I get to introduce Nate Wilson, N.D. Wilson. The reason I have this is they've told me to stick to the script. They know me. Do not veer from the script. It's written right here. So Nate is the author of Lee Pike Ridge, a children's adventure story, the 100 Cupboards fantasy series, the Notes from the Tilt-a-Whirl, which, remember, tonight they'll retry that at 8. Here's what it says. It says, he enjoys high winds, milk, and nighttime. And he's also told me that he enjoys puppy dogs, long walks on the beach, and world peace. He received his master's degree from St. John's College in Annapolis, and he's the senior editor of Credenda Agenda magazine, which means I won't be writing for that anymore, and is also a fellow of literature at New St. Andrews College. His writing has appeared in Books and Culture, the Chattahoochee Review, and Esquire. He and Heather have 5 beautiful children. Nate?
Terrific job, Mitch. Let's pray first. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for our eyes and ears. I pray that you would open them, help us to see and hear you, and help us to keep seeing and keep hearing. In your Son's name, amen. Nighttime is pretty awesome. And actually, I should say that nighttime is an inside joke I have with my wife because she bought me a generic cold product at some point called Nighttime. And it said original green flavor on the bottle. And so when I originally put that in my bio, I did that for Thomas Nelson to see if they would keep it in. They did, actually. And I meant both nighttime as in nighttime, but also nighttime, the generic cold product. But only the original green flavor. It's original and green. Not very long ago, a ball of molten, sloppy rock with crackly skin and moist skin turned just a little bit. Everything became bright, and we all woke up this morning. Some of us woke up more than others. And while our molten ball screamed through space, lapping the nearest ever-exploding fire angel star, we yawned, we dribbled some juice, which some machine squeezed out of the bottom of a cow, onto dry bits of grain farmed in distant valleys and processed in Chicago. We prodded it listlessly with a spoon. Or maybe we ate eggs. Where do those come from? My children have frequently studied eggs, held them up, looked at the shells when their mom's not around, and I let them handle the raw eggs. And the answer is only vulgar. There's just no correct, there's really nothing I can say to them. Where does this come from, Dad? From a chicken's rear end. The well-behaved chickens squeeze them out regularly, and they work really well with cheese. And they do. This world, this place is a place that we become very numb to very, very quickly. And I'm kind of grateful that in God's providence, the tilt-a-whirl showing didn't work last night, because now I can say a lot of the same things. I was planning on avoiding a lot of the same things, but it's sort of, too bad. And if you've already seen it, bear with me. Some of this is really new ways of saying the same thing. I think that we, especially as modern Americans, have to constantly work to keep our eyes open. And part of this is because we always have other things to look at. There's a lot of things. There's smartphones and flat screens and traffic and all sorts of stuff to process and to think about. And there's all sorts of bait and switch games going on with modern culture and technology, making us view the world in certain ways just by default and by impulse over and over and over again, just by rote. We see the world in the ways of modernism, in a mechanical, materialistic way. I've recently released another fantasy novel. It's something I do occasionally. And I often have to explain to people out in the broader marketplace why I write the way I write about the worlds I write about. And I've had to say about 100 cupboards, and now I have to say about the new series, Ashtown Burials, and the first book, The Dragon's Tooth, that I'm writing about here. I'm writing about this world. This is my fantasy world. This is what I'm writing about. And I'll stand up and I'll tell school kids that we live in one. We live in a fantasy world. Some of you flew here, literally flew through the sky to come here. And when we fly, when we go, pay some money to some surly person or a website now, some imaginary face on a glowing screen, and we take a number off of a piece of plastic and somehow it has some value, or so we all think. And they give me a little ticket and I show up and I let the man in the uniform or the angry overweight woman in the uniform poke me and prod me and be angry at me because I dare to come to fly. And I walk through the little machines that supposedly can tell if I'm carrying something metallic. And they actually can. That's the weird thing. Although I challenge them. I regularly challenge them. See how much change I can hold on to. It's like, and then it beeps, you drop one dime. Let's try this again. People behind you in line love that. Especially if you always choose the expert traveler line. And then you go do that. It's like, okay, we'll raise the machine a quarter. See if it works this time. And how long it takes before you're off in the little room getting checked. You try to avoid that if at all possible. But some of you flew here, and when we fly, we get into a machine that's the size of a school bus or bigger. And it's made out of metal, which our dwarves dug out of the rock, and our smiths melted down in vats the size of small volcanoes. And then it got hammered out and pressed out and riveted together. And then we have other people with very, very long drill bits who find this sloppy mess from the flood down deep, this black goop where all the forests of the earth were smashed together and turned into oobleck. And they suck that stuff up, and then we give it to our little wizardy alchemist types and their factories belching flames out the smokestacks. And they make it pure and explosive. And we shove it inside this machine, and then we blow it up, and we hang on tight. And somebody stands there and says, "This is how you buckle." It's like, when riding on an explosion through the sky, across the middle, it's required by law, no smoking, as we just sort of, you just through the sky. And when we do this, when we sit down, I can tell you that what I'm thinking is, this is really uncomfortable. This seat, why do they do this? They can make this thing fly through the sky, but they can't figure out how to make a seat comfortable. And then all the old jokes about, well, you get the free peanuts, a little bag of peanuts, and how many peanuts, and soda, you have to ask for the whole can or they won't give it to you. 4 pieces of ice and a tablespoon of Sprite. And this is what we're distracted by. This is what we see. We forget the fact that this was all sucked up out of the earth, that massive machines and thousands of people pulled this ore up, this metallic ore, and smelted it for us, and we have our engineers, our wizards of one type, make it into this shape, and our wizards of another type make the fuel, and we have wings that can trick the air into moving faster over one side than the other. And when you trick air into doing that, you fly. It doesn't matter if you're heavy or not. The air is moving faster over one side of the wing than the other, and so we go off to a conference to hear spiritual things. This is a very, very strange world. Right now, we're traveling at approximately Mach 86. That's not actually in any way factoring in the spinning of the earth. That's just the orbit of the sun. And this is a massive ball of fire, and we are literally just whipping around this thing, just screaming, just laps over and over and over again. We're basically moving at about 18 miles a second. So it's like 1/1000, you're pulling it back, just just over and over and over again, just high speed. And somehow we're not flying away from this ball of fire in the sky, and somehow we're not being sucked in. and to listen to our priests try to explain to us why this is, it is very difficult to understand. Because we're also not the only ones. We've got a moon that's doing it to us, and there's other planets that are doing the same thing. And they say, well, it's the attraction of mass. And luckily, the attraction of mass is exactly counteracted by what we like to call centrifugal force. So we're whipping around this thing and not flying away because we're also being sucked into the ball of fire simultaneously, which basically means we're balancing on a razor's edge, right? Because there's not an actual chain. We're not actually buckled in. We're just screaming through space. And if you start to read, one of the things I really like to talk to kids about, and I'll talk to secular kids about it in public schools, or Christian kids in Christian schools, or grown-ups who have forgotten it the most. Kids will absorb it pretty quickly. But we're living in this fantasy world, and if you told Frodo about how you got here, whether it's a car, a minivan, a small electric death trap, death whistle, I call some of them, however you got here, Frodo would call it fantasy. Frodo would call it magic. He needed an eagle to do the same thing, to get through the sky. But something I think is really, really important for all of us to constantly do is not just to think things intellectually. A lot of us have doctrine like we also have the Pledge of Allegiance. We have 5 points of Calvinism. We have Westminster Confession. We have whatever it is, the Apostles' Creed, stuff that's really good, stuff that's great, but we kind of tick it off. Okay, everybody stand up, hands over the hearts. Yes, 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 yes. Sit back down. We just acknowledge it, but we keep it up in our heads. That's where we maintain our beliefs in our mind. And then we walk around looking at the world as if it was this neutral place, looking at trees that are made out of air and the energy from the fireball in the sky. Like then we need to trim that thing back. That thing's going to scrape the siding. Or we need more apples to magically appear on this thing. So we're going to prune this. And it's just a thing to do on a Saturday, and that's it. We yawn and we move on, and we forget exactly how psychotic this world is, exactly how strange this place is. And unfortunately, even the smart ones of us who know about worldviews and philosophies and the culture wars, and we are engaged, and it's important that we argue with atheists, and we have these arguments and so on. Unfortunately, even those of us, our fighters, our champions that we send out, constantly forget what this place is, what it's like, which means that they are forgetting who God is and what He is like. To ignore the natural world, to ignore natural revelation, is to ignore this massive cheat sheet of God's personality, this whole museum of His work, this whole library of His stories. And we just kind of, ignore that, shove that over there. There is a sovereign God, check. Now I'm going to go back to work. Or now I'm going to sit over my breakfast and yawn and bemoan the day. Yet another day, we say. Another time when this ball of molten rock turned. Again, one more time, on command, on schedule, running like a German train system. Like just always there, always turning. And here it is again. I didn't sleep in that glorious nighttime long enough. We just ignore it. We forget it. And I write fantasy novels, which means when it comes to worlds, I'm a certified professional. I have a little card from the government. I know all about world diagnostics. I have long arguments with editors about consistent fantasy logic. Things like that. It's like, it's really important. And it's one of the things that drives me nuts when you read a fantasy novel where they just kind of like, it's magical, so we don't have to be consistent. It's magic. It's like, well, so is all of this. But there are patterns and there are rules. Harkening back to my father's talk, it's like there are things that are divided. They're made this way and not that way. And once they're made this way and not that way, a heroine will win her story. She will triumph in one way, and a hero will triumph in another. It's like there's different narrative paths and narrative arcs and narrative logic. But when we look at this world and you poll modern Americans, if you had your little clipboard and you're going to tick them off, kind of, so this is what are you? What is it that you are? What is your view of God? And if you want to know their view of God, get their view of the world. If you want to know your own view of God, test your view of the world. You can't say, well, intellectually, I think God is this way. But over here, when I look at all of his work, I see mayhem. I see nothing. I don't see any glory there. I don't see any joy there at all. But over here, oh yes, God is sovereign. Everything's foreordained from before the foundations of the world. Get your clipboard out and go poll some people and ask them about reality. What do you believe this world is? And when they tell you that, you can go back to their temple. You can trace it back to their temple pretty quickly. They are atheists. Check. Nothing. There's nothing here. And of course, we could talk about despairing, nihilistic atheists. We could talk about sort of the nearly extinct atheist that believes that there's actually morality, that there could be objective morality in an atheistic world. There's very few of them left. They're like flightless dodos. They still have wings. Morality, look. I still have it. Haven't lost it yet, but you're easy to hunt. Atheists, they also get hunted from both sides. Atheists, there is no meaning. Look out there, just nothing. There's no meaning. Meaningless. And they cut in a lot of different directions depending on where you are, whether you're in a romantic era or an extremely modernist era, whether they think that, there's all these secrets about making things stand up straight, making glass shiny, but we're still atheists, or they're people who just want to take the next round of opium and write some really bad poetry. There's a lot of different kinds of atheists, personality-wise, but ultimately they just say, it is what we make of it. It's nothing much. This description my father had of matter before the foundations of the world, this little pinprick of matter, hydrogen, the amazing gas that can become all things. But their story of origins, if you really push them on it, most of them don't want to talk about it actually, but if you really push them, they have this pinprick of hypermatter. Hypermatter, this really tiny little dot, and then one day it was running in the halls and it tripped. And you heard this little tiny, oh crap, and then boom, everything went. That's what you'll get from an atheist, and unfortunately from some Christians, or the next category, which is agnostic. These are the real thoughtful ones. Agnostics are just kind of pragmatics who think they can get through the world, but just become, I don't know. Don't push me. I don't know. I'm not saying anything. Stop bothering me. And in my own experience, agnostics frequently really like to argue. But it's like playing basketball against somebody who always wants to take a charge. Just always. Like check the ball at the beginning, throw a little 3-on-3. I don't know, I didn't say anything. I didn't say it, but you can't say anything either. We don't know. I don't know, you don't know. That's my position. We don't know. Do these people then go to church just in case? What do they think of Pascal's wager? So you don't know if there might be an eternal hell. Do you want to cover your bases at all? No, they don't. These are frequently just atheists with another strategy. It's like that's it. The passive-aggressive atheist. You have the aggressive atheist who puts up little billboards in our town. Think before you believe. And I drive by it and I have this little twinge of guilt because I have not yet spray-painted billboards under believe. Think before you believe billboards. Yet another missed opportunity. Another gift squandered. Agnostics are just passive-aggressive atheists. They just want you to stop telling them what to do, but they will then go live like atheists. If they start living like Christians, just in case, they're on their way. I mean, they're already coming in. They're already fearful. They're already acknowledging guilt and worry. They're going to be in the faith. We've got atheists. We've got agnostics. Then we've got theists. Ooh, the good guys, right? Yeah, wrong. No. Theists can sustain more problems for longer. A lot longer, because they've got a bigger Band-Aid. And that's it. There is a God. There is a person who blew up this balloon and then tied it off and let it go. It's like as if we could just team up with Muslims because we believe that there's a person, there's a thing, there's an entity that inflated this balloon. Thomas Jefferson, the clockwinder view. Theists are frequently machinists. They like the laws of nature, the laws of logic, the scientific method. There are patterns here. Let's talk intelligent design, intelligent design. One atheist, evolutionary atheist, made fun of the ID guys by saying, we're not saying there's a God who made this world, just that it was intelligently designed, just that something or someone made this world with the exact same skill set as God. That's all we're saying. It's innocuous, it's innocent. And it's honestly, it's an ineffective ploy. It's not a game we're going to win by going that route, by saying, it could have been an alien. We're not saying anything. Super smart, good at designing stuff. But they're also missing the whole point. Because when you look around, this is a little tangent, if you look at the cow, I don't just see someone who's good at designing stuff. Like, here's this cow looking at you with a big cow eye, chewing the cud, grazing permanently, raising the tail, grazing some more, and raising the tail. And here's this bacterial bag swinging under its belly. And you think, can I drink that? Is there any way we could make this work? If I sneak in from the side and start squeezing? It's not just good at designing stuff. This is not how the Germans would have done it. You bring in the BMW engineers would not have come in and said, best way to produce milk for large numbers of people. This is not what they would have come up with. Theists can be a problem because they do acknowledge a thing, a something. And you have more trouble arguing with them, and you have more trouble realizing that you ought to. Because who cares if there's a thing out there? Who cares about that? The question is there a salvific God? Is there a personal creator? Is there a Father and a Son and a Spirit? It's like, is there a Father, creator, lover, God? Is there a Son, an older brother, a covenant head, a Savior? Is there a Spirit who remains with us, indwelling us? That's the question. And the theists, they'll acknowledge, the flagellar motor is pretty impressive. It is, and they're right. And they can keep on frittering away, living in a secular state easily. Then, of course, there's polytheists, and there are a lot of these too, although they're not what you might think. They're not just like tree worshipers, people who like the fertility goddesses, although they might. It's like there's a lot of different variations on this. There's people who believe in the laws of logic and then natural law. And they bring in these different authorities. They grab them and line them up in their little temple where we have multiple statues. And we know which days we drop which basket of fruit off in front of which thing. And actually, we also, if you're getting this major, you go serve in this temple. And if you're getting this major, you go hang out in that temple. That's more of like a modern polytheism. Different authorities, different headwaters. And then, of course, I should really quickly just categorize everybody else as sort of snotty cop-outs. You got the snotty cop-out category, Buddhists, postmoderns, other smoke-blowing word gamers. It's all illusion. Well, is that ethics situated? Has it been situated? If so, that's a problem. If not, that's a problem. Don't tell me to do anything at all. Don't tell me. And again, cross-referencing what my father was talking about, in terms of if everything was an explosion, if hypermatter was running in the halls and went kaboo, and then here we are, not only can we keep changing, but also what we are has no authority. I didn't want to be this. This is a result of an explosion. Every time a surgeon cuts you, it's a surgeon after a car wreck. Every time you decide to make a change, you're saying, I know what I am truly. It's like, I know that I'm actually, I'm a guy, but I'm actually a woman. And oddly enough, I'm actually a lesbian woman. And that happens a lot. In the transgendered community, that is a regular occurrence. It's like, I'm supposed to be a woman, but I'm supposed to be the homosexual version of the woman. But if you are a result of the explosion, then you can do that. You can perpetuate the explosion. You can push the accident a little further. And more importantly, the accident that got you where you are already is not authoritative. It's not the boss of you. It has created you as you are, but it can't say that you ought to be that. You can just shift and move. Now this list, atheist, agnostic, theist or machinists, polytheists, and then all the snotty cop-outs, unfortunately, the truth is not on that list. A lot more, unfortunately, most Christians are. That's where most Christians are by default, by impulse. Not by what they will affirm on a multiple choice test. Tick, which box are you? Atheist, agnostic, theist. It's like, well, they look for maybe the smart ones, other Christian. It's like if you give them a statement of faith, they might say, yeah, I believe there's a God and there's a meaning. I believe God made this world. Yeah, I believe all that. I believe the 5 points of Calvinism also. But on impulse, what are they? What are they when they wake up in the morning? What are they when they step outside? What are they when they get in the minivan and are driving to school? What are they when they're looking at porn or gossiping about their husband? What are they then? Are they still affirming their God? Are they still affirming their faith in their actions? Or have they become very quickly, sneakily atheists or agnostics or polytheists? Think about this for a second. Anytime a guy is saying, yes, I believe there's a sovereign God, I believe he's omniscient, I believe he's omnipresent, I believe all these things, and yet, I kind of want to look at a picture of a naked woman right now. But he's right here with me. Oh, yes. And now I'm going to go look at porn. With him or without him? Like how quickly do sinners become atheists? How quickly are they just going to like, la, 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 he's not there. He's not there. He's not there right now. How many teenage guys would flunk this test? A dad who comes into a room and says, son, we need to work on lust. They slide a Playboy across the table and say, don't look at it. And I'm going to sit here and make sure I find out whether you do. Dad sits there, sets the timer. See if you can go 15 minutes. And the son is sitting there at the table with the dad and the magazine. And pretty soon the son starts whistling. Looking around. Dad's still there. Peeling the cover up. He won't know. What is going on there? Apart from a quick affirmation of father absence. A quick affirmation of atheism. How quickly do Calvinists throw away sovereign, omniscient, omnipresent God when they're tempted and they begin to stumble? How quickly do they realize, I kind of want to stumble here. But in order to get there, I need to forget that Pops is sitting right there across from me. I'm willing to bet good money that no good little Christian boy would flunk the test, whether his pastor or his father sat down and set the magazine on the table and said, don't look at it, and then sat there with him. How many of those guys, and if they did flunk that, they should be medicated. But Dad's saying, we're going to see if you can handle this, and he crosses his arms and watches. But atheism comes so fast by default. Every time you start to tell a lie, every time you start to gossip, every time you start to slander, every time you start to stand there, if you're young and your friends are saying stupid things and you're thinking, do I giggle? Do I make like I'm one of them or not? It's like all the time, every time the Christians sin like that, the cock crows. Every time. It's always there. Will you betray him or not? He's right there. You've affirmed that. You've said you believe this. You've said you believe he's here with you, and yet you want to do this. And yet you're afraid of these 14-year-old girls. They might think you're a Christian or you're uptight, and so you're going to go along with it instead of along with the Creator God who happens to be there with you right now. It's like they have more influence on you. You're going to go along with that little flashing link that Google sent you so helpfully. You're going to go along with something like this slander, gossip, lies, envy, resentment, you have to be an atheist first. You have to, quickly. Quickly, make yourself an atheist so that you can do it. Yelling at your kids is not something you'd probably do with your mom in the room or your pastor in the room, but you'll do it with your God there. It's like you have to get him away from you in order to sin like that. Christians who are agnostic are just doubters. They function like, I don't really know. They walk around, it's like, God, do you hear me? I'm praying. I don't know if you hear me. I don't know. They kind of punch the clock. They're doing it by rote, but they've slipped. Now, the Christian atheists are usually like atheists in spurts. They're usually the boy right after he flunks the test being like, Dad, I'm sorry. I know you're here. I shouldn't have done that. But the agnosticism among Christians it really sticks. It's like it's creeping. And then we still try to act like it's intellectual, when it usually is a lot of the atheist moments accumulated. A lot of that sin accumulated, and then just this general state of numbness working through reality. And then, of course, the Christian theists, the people who really say, well, God made this world, he foreordained everything, but that was way back then. Remember? It's before the foundations of the world. So he did it then, and now it's just kind of whirring along, clicking. It's like an OK Go music video, if you've ever seen one, not the treadmill one. It's like this long mousetrap game. You got bowling balls that fall, that make umbrellas bounce, that make a ping pong ball roll, that make the dominoes go. It's like that. He set up this long game, and then he tipped it. And he did it by predestination, foreordination, whatever it is, but he's not here right now. He's back there. And that enables us to sin nicely. It enables us to fuss nicely. It enables us to treat the world like it's a machine. Like we can manipulate different parts of it and make it do things for us. And the thing that's amazing is that we can. He really did put all this metal in the earth. He didn't give it to us made in sheets. It's like he put it down there for us to dig, for us to find, for us to take dominion. It's like there is all this oil, there are all these fossil fuels, all these things that we can mix and play with. There are all these things laced throughout his creation for us to discover and find. And it can feel like he's back there. And we're downstream in the domino game where it's all falling and bouncing. We're discovering and we're exploring. But all that is just being a clock-winding deist. That's it. How do we live like he's here right now? Then think about other Christians who you have the forces of evil. Turns out that Satan is with them a lot more often than God is. The devil wanted me. The devil was really trying. The devil was really beating me up. The devil this, the devil that. The devil is all around. God, however, when will I hear from you, O God? When will you help me? They chalk up all this temptation, all this sin to the influence of the devil, and then they forget the other. They make this other this demigod of darkness. Or different Christians who forget the different parts of the Trinity. Christians who act like, well, I really connect well to the Spirit. Or I like the Son. I feel like I should pray to Jesus, not to the Father. I can get him. It's like they try to divorce different parts and personalities of God, and they try to parse him out and connect with one slice. But they do this also when they look out at the world. Men like to do it in one way, women in another. Is our God the God of bunny rabbits, the God of kittens, or the God of thunderstorms? And different personalities drift to different places. It's like, and when the thunderstorm comes, you find pastors saying, well, now I've got something to explain to my congregation, because how could God allow this to happen? Or how could God, in his providence, see fit for this to happen? But for some reason, when I offer them a basket full of kittens, none of them have any questions. Oh, look, it's God's handiwork. Don't feed them at all. These things are vicious, nasty creatures. Don't let them get out of the basket. Take a snapshot, not a video, because pretty soon they're going to rip each other's ears off. So get the cute pink background, quickly, cute kittens in the basket, or a baby in a basket, or one of those oh so precious photos of children that you can buy in calendars where you have these crying babies sitting in terracotta pots and other abuses. Polytheists, Christians who buy into reason, Christians who buy into the concept of the laws of logic as apart from God. Here's a question for you. If you're one of those smart types, engineering types, apart from God, is the Pythagorean theorem true? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Right triangle, the square of A, the square of B equals the square of C. Now, if you actually do this proof like Euclid would have you do it, you realize that you memorized it by rote as a school kid, and it literally means the square. If you take A and you make it into a square with the sides that length, and you take B and you make it into a square with the sides that length, and you add them together by area, it actually equals the exact area of C made into a square. Is that true apart from God? And there's this impulse among smart ones, smart carbon units with 2 feet who stir their breakfast listlessly in the mornings, the smart ones on this molten rock that's whistling around the fireball in the sky to say, well, that is, sort of a necessary truth because it's a straight line, you understand. Straight line, and there's a right angle, and it kind of has to be that way. Does it? It has to be that way. And we can talk about math and the extension of God's personality and his consistency, his immutability, and why we can actually distill these principles from his creation, and they are true, and they remain true. We can do that, and you can have theological reasons for why this is true and will be true tomorrow because of God, because of God's personality, because of God's nature. But you cannot say, well, if this was all just an explosion, that could still be true of necessity. The laws of logic. Matter is neither created nor destroyed. We've got natural laws too like that. Is that true? Matter is neither created nor destroyed? That is a load of poppycock. Now we can say, as a general rule of thumb, now that we are here, we do not see matter being created nor destroyed, generally speaking, that we know. But out there, in Andromeda, we have decided by committee, God, no more of that. And also, if you decide to smash something or destroy something, please, could you make sure that the same mass exists before and afterward? It's because we've decided that you're not going to destroy that anymore. I'm not saying that that matter is destroyed or matter is created right now. I'm saying that what we've decided by committee and put in a textbook does not bind him. Cross-reference the discussion with Pastor Mark Driscoll last night, talking about secession of the gifts. I believe that the prophetic gifts and all those things have ceased, the canon is closed, and so on. But I'm also not going to say, by the way, God, we've decided that you're not going to do that anymore. We better make sure it's descriptive, not prescriptive. We better make sure that we're doing this, looking at him, trying to say, so what is he doing? Is he doing this or is he not? We have decided what? God does burden people, but he doesn't give people pictures of things. He doesn't. We've decided this. Who's for that ban? Who's in favor of it? It's like, who's in favor of saying that God does not give a true dream anymore? Right. Gavel banged. We'll send the memo. We'll send the memo up. We got to watch ourselves. Natural law, rationality, all these things, reformed, smart readers in the Christian world can really quickly drift to those kinds of truths and just grant them to the atheists who want to be able to play with our tools. These things which we have because God is a consistent creator. Because he is consistent, we can depend on repeating something in the laboratory under the same circumstances and say, does it do it again here? And apart from some sort of intervention, divine intervention, we can begin to isolate variables and discover a pattern of how his creation interacts with itself because of his consistency, because of the way he works. Christians cannot be atheists any minute of any day. Christians cannot be agnostic any minute of any day. They cannot be mere theists or machinists trying to distill patterns and designs. And look at it's fancy and well engineered. And honestly, a lot of the ID types would be better off saying, it's completely wackadoodle crazy. I mean, really? A deep sea fish with its own little street lamp? Really? It's kind of funny. Its own little street lamp combined with that face. We've all seen it in Finding Nemo, well depicted. It's like, and we can't say, the engineering is remarkable. It's like, yes it is, but you know what else is? The sense of humor. The personality. That's what's amazing there. That's what's hilarious there. And also, it's like, light comes on the fish, say, ooh, nice. At what point, at what point did that nasty fish stuck way down there with nothing to eat say, I think I need to mutate a street lamp? I'm serious, I need one. I'm lazy, I don't like chasing my meals, and I've noticed that smaller fish are attracted to light, at least at this depth. Let's see if I can lay my eggs a little funny this time. Maybe my children will have a bump. We'll work towards an elongation. At some point, we're going to go for some kind of phosphorescence. I'm not sure yet. There's different options. But that's what we're going to do. It's done, fish of the deep. This is our plan. We will begin mutating in that direction. It's laughable. It is completely laughable. It's not just a feat of engineering. Isn't that cool? Yes, that's cool. It is cool. Engineering-wise, it's neat. I like these kinds of things. I like engineering designs. It's neat, especially in nature, more so than when people do it. But you can't get there. You just can't. It's like for a long time, scientists would say, yes, the bumblebee, we acknowledge, the bumblebee cannot fly. Can't be done. And yet, something roughly as heavy as a golf ball, wobbling around. And they had to grow second straps. So you have a butterfly, or a lot of other flies will have two straps inside the thorax. So you have this little chest cavity, and you've got these two straps strapped down to the bottom of the thorax where they're winched in tight and attached to the wing hinges above, and there's one muscle in between. And they can pump that muscle, and it pushes those straps out, and then the wings move. And they can relax it, and the wings move back. And you have this butterfly. It kind of moves around. The bumblebee, just can't get away with that. They needed this double strap system. They needed straps that would pull the wings back, and they needed recoil straps that would snap them back so they could get the RPMs up. And again, same thing. Some fat, fuzzy, pituitary-problemed honeybee did not say to himself, I think a second pair of straps would have worked nicely here. Let's get to work on it. Go back to the queen and put in a request. Could we maybe mess with the larvae recipe? It's like you just can't do it. The dragonfly, this crazy machine, 360-degree vision with those compound eyes, can fly straight backwards. The only insect that can just reverse direction and go any direction. According to some reports, they've been clocked at over 60 miles an hour. Now, when I've told some scientists that, they say, no, it's not true. It's not true. Okay, according to some reports. By other reports, ones that cannot be falsified, they can fly wicked fast. And I have seen this with mine own eyes. There it goes. I've also seen my son have some sort of strange connectivity with them, and my daughter's not. I spent hours at a pond trying to help my daughter touch a dragonfly. She desperately wanted to, and we would have settled for a damselfly. At this point, she just wanted something long, skinny, with wings. I could have pawned off any number of things on her and said, it's a dragonfly. And I could have even kind of justified it morally, because by common names, okay, fine. We were trying hard. I was trying to help her. Usually I can accomplish these kinds of things. Usually I can do it. Holding grass out was the best we could do. We could get one to land on a piece of grass. My son was off looking for turtles, and as we were heading finally after hours of this back to the car, he could hear his sister complaining that she had not touched a dragonfly. And she was cheerful about it. She wasn't sinning about it, but she wanted to. She really wanted to touch one. And he said, "Really?" And he kind of stopped and looked around. And we were away from the water, well away from the water, down by this parking lot, and he sees one way up there. And he kind of stops and looks at it and just stands out and waits. And I'm looking at him, and his sister, because she's grown up with him, takes this for granted. She's like, "Oh, good, Rory's helping." So Rory just kind of stands there, and the dragonfly turns and comes down and lands on his shirt. He's wearing a black shirt, not flowers, nothing else. And he's done this before. I did this when he was 2 with a butterfly, and I included that in tilt-a-whirl because it really kind of rattled me. And this time I'm like, well, here we are again. And he looks down, he's got this big, fat, true dragonfly, no damselflies here. This is a true dragonfly, hefty, helicopter-looking Apache dragonfly sitting on his shoulder. And so he picks it up and sets it on his sister's arm. It's like, okay, so in future, Lucia, just ask your brother. just cut this out. And then he moves off to the car like, yeah, this is normal. Easy peas. And then he also, as a side note, said, I think it's having some trouble with its eyes. But he picked up on that, some eye trouble. He also recently saved a butterfly from a boy, the kind of boy we would refer to as a Sid in our house. I hope none of you are named Sid or have children named Sid, but there's a boy in Toy Story named Sid who likes to destroy things and wreck things and just for the fun of it. And so we've always talked about the boy who steps on the ant because the ant is there is a Sid. The boy who wants to shove a garter snake down a hose and turn it on is a Sid. No boy has ever thought of that before. He's a Sid. Rory rescued this butterfly from a boy who was trying to kill it, and he rode home, an hour in the car with his butterfly on his shoulder, and then ate dinner with his butterfly on his shoulder, and I was ready to have this conversation about, I think the butterfly is going to die, because this is not, normal. And the butterfly also seemed to have a little wing damage. So he sat there for a while working on the wings, trying to shift the wings slightly, not touching the fuzz, messing with the joints, trying to get them to line up and balance well. And I was going to go have the word of pretty soon we freeze it and we pin it in your collection. And he was fine with that. It's like, if that's what it was, it's like, if that would be best for the butterfly. And at some point he knew it would be. He wouldn't have a problem with it. But after dinner, he decided to go feed it. And so he carried it to some flowers that he thought it would probably enjoy and watched it unroll its proboscis, this long beak in, and drink. He picked it up and moved it to the next one. And it unrolled and drank, and he moved it to the next one, and then it flew off. It's like he had this thing on him for hours. And I think, well, in a mechanical world, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. In a world where people have different gifts and senses, where people can see things differently, and in a world, most importantly, where there is a God who gives things differently. There are people to whom crazy things happen. I end up in a lot of circumstances that are socially awkward, and I promise were not my fault. It's one of the patterns. It's like you're reading this novel about this character, there's themes and motifs and repetitions. And I'm watching my sons and I can pick up on some already. And I watch mine, it's like if I'm in Israel, I'm the one that the Russian Israeli soldiers are going to pull out of the taxi cab with M16s. The ones who can't actually speak any Hebrew or English or I don't know about any language at all. I'm that guy. I'm the guy who's going to get pulled out. It's like I'm the guy who's going to have those kinds of weird incidents. If I go someplace, stuff happens. My sister's family, they just walk around waiting for cataclysms. Just, different cataclysms. Things happen. Things just go very, very wrong. When my wife and I went on a trip with them around Europe, we said, well, let's Merkel it. It's a verb. Let's Merkel. We're going to Merkel this thing. What could possibly happen? We wanted to make a T-shirt up for the cousins afterward with a little map of Europe and a little key where you have a logo. It's like robbed in, car wreck in, threw up in. And admittedly, it was my son who threw up in like 5 or 6 countries, marking territory for the gospel. But just, there are people. People have different stories. People have different motifs. And how could that make sense? How could that work? It's like, well, because there's an author. There is one. Now think in terms of what you are. You're a Christian. You affirm things intellectually. You affirm them in your head. But do you affirm them with your bones? It's like, do you affirm them by instinct in any given moment? Do you really? Run the Rorschach test on yourself. At any given moment, what do you see outside? You know what Rorschach tests are? The ink blot tests that try to make everybody sexual perverts. I took one last night just out of curiosity. It's like this blotch, and the options are, do you see someone threatening you? Something scary? A sexual image. Someone threatening you? Something scary. A sexual image. It's like, I see somebody who's been doing blowfishes on a glass coffee table. It's all these smears and things like that. Walk outside and take a Rorschach test. Look at the trees. Look at the sun. Smell the air and the rain. What do you see? What do you hear? And if the answer is not God, then there's a problem. That should just be instinctive. God. How is this here? What is this made of? You affirm ex nihilo creation? Do you really? Do you impulsively think that way? Do you, on a Freudian slip level, think of this as created from nothing, by nothing but the power of the voice of God? This is made of cells, wood cells, sugars, carbons, made of atoms, electrons, quarks, leptons. Scientists put on their coats and say, well, I got an extra special PhD so I can tell you the up quarks and down quarks. There are up quarks and down ones. Up and down ones. Elementary particles, down and down and down. And what is that made of? What is the quark made of? What is the elementary particle made of? What is it made of, evolutionists? What is it made of, Buddhist? Suffering. What is it made of, Christian? What is it made of, Apache? What is it made of, Babylonian? The Greeks? It's a chunk of Zeus's thigh, you see. Marduk, the dragon's vomit. So they can come up with all sorts of things, but for a Christian, what is it made of? What is it made of? We affirm this. Nothing. Nothing. It is spoken. It has been spoken, it is spoken, and it will be spoken tomorrow because God is a consistent and faithful God. That's why it's still here. That's why your pews haven't vanished, why you haven't all just hit the floor in one move. Because he's still talking. He's still sustaining. He didn't tie off the balloon and let it go. He didn't just roll the dominoes. The dominoes are still here by the power of his voice. They are still spoken. And so they're still here. We can still hear them. Words are power. When I speak to you, we think of it as an intellectual thing. It's not. It is. It has an element. It's physical. I create a shape. I use this physical entity that I've got in my throat, and I go, and I send a physical ripple through the air, and it hits you in the head. And you say, that was insightful. Or, what's he talking about? Harmonies exist. What are harmonies? One person singing on this wavelength, one person singing here. Physically, they come together and they become a third thing. They become a thing out there physically in the world. It is an object and it hits you, and you get chills. This is not an explosion. And all of this is sustained by God's voice right now. It's all here right now. Why isn't the earth whistling away from the sun all of a sudden? There it goes. Because God still has told it to be where it is. He still called it from nothing and put it there. It doesn't mean this is illusion. It's not. This is real. This is physical. This is a very real, fleshy place, which is what the magic is. Because God made it that way using his voice. Not the Play-Doh, that existed before time, not the hydrogen, not the hypermatter, his voice. He spoke it. We are all incarnations. All of this, the centipedes at the top of a cave, which are big enough to catch and eat bats, are incarnations, and they manifest as personality. The giant earthworms in Australia, you can stand there and listen to them slurp around their tunnels. They are incarnations. They are spoken. They are put down there in those secret places, and they manifest as personality. Kittens manifest as personality, yes, even the color pink. And you can get the best color pink after a forest fire as the sun goes down. And the fire is an incarnation. He spoke it. He created it. It's a manifestation of him and reflects his personality. Regularity, natural law, all these things that we describe, the tricks we play on air to make ourselves fly, they all come from him. What do you see? What do you hear? When you step outside, you should hear the voice of God right now. In the immediate, he's saying parking lot and sun and heat ripples. Trees are being called out of air, made from carbon dioxide. Go blow on that, feed it. They'll grab the carbon and make it into another pine needle and go on to the glory of God. Fall colors tell you what about him? Tornadoes tell you what about him? The fact that we are not sucked into the fireball or thrown away from the fireball tell you what about him? The fact that water comes back around, think about the rain cycle. Okay, why does it have to be that way? Why does it always come back? Think if water just evaporated for good. Well, this would have been a very short-lived planet. Swoop, and done. Think about the consequences if poo was not good fertilizer. Does it have to be? Does it need to be? Did the creatures that are going to graze and lift their tails think, whoa, 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 Harry, we need to think ahead? We really do. I mean, we need to make sure that what we output has got to be good for what we input. Got to keep this thing going. No, of course not. It's like, why is poo good for green things? Because of God's grace. Why does water come back around? Because of God's grace. Why are clouds cool to look at? Because he's kind aesthetically as well as in every other way. Think about how small we are sitting on this little planet. Think about if you got to be there at that historic dunk contest in the NBA where Michael Jordan jumped from the free throw line, and you could be there, one of these tiny little ants sitting in the nest, and they're all stomping and cheering, and here's one of them, he's going to run, he's going to jump, and we made a little metal hoop, and it's about yay high, and he's going to jump, and he's going to throw a little thing through it. He's going to do it. And you can sit there and you can get the chills as the stadium shakes and everybody cheers and the music plays, and then he comes and he jumps. Now back off, just pull that camera back and look at the earth and see how high that guy's jumping. Ba-doo. It's amazing. When we look at storms and we look at yet another hurricane coming or waves, tsunamis, and you think about, look at that coastline, look at the beach, and you got all these kind of stupid girls with their own reality show putting on too much oil and lying there in the heat, buffaloing, as my wife would say, buffaloing out there on the beach. We're on this molten ball of rock, Mach 86, and this is how still it is. This is how calm it is. The waves can pss, pss, and they can just kind of sit there. And then every time it shakes a little bit, some buildings fall. We go, whoa, why would God ever? How could he? It's amazing how perfectly balanced we are and how maintained we are. It's like we're like a kid just getting tossed by his dad. And as long as we don't know we're being tossed, we're fine. And the instant there's any kind of like, whoa, whoa, I'm an atheist now. That's it. Look and listen. Look and listen. See what God has done. Hear what God has done. As you eat your breakfast, think about the cows and thank God for them. Thank God for the Dutch people who brought the cows into the machines. Thank God for the farmers, a continent away from you, who labored to shepherd this grain up from the earth, to sit there and watch and wait for God to do his magic so they could gather it and send it to somebody in Chicago who would smash it and bake it. Add a little cinnamon, a little sugar. Perfect. And you sit there thinking, I've gotten tired of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Beards, things just keep coming out of my face. And I didn't have to learn. It's one of those things, guys will take pride in it. Like, I grew this. Me, I did it. Eating. The concept, not what my father was talking about, the orange and atom. It's like where it just fell into it's like it's segmented. It's pre-packaged. It's like a Lunchable. You take the peel off, and it's like it even doesn't get the juice on your fingers. It's like it's got a nice little membrane. It's all perfectly there. And Adam looked at it and thought, where do I put it? His mouth. What? Why? I've got bones in there that are visible. I think I could smash this with it. At what point is he thinking, but from the beginning, it's clear. He says, don't eat of that tree. You can eat of any tree. It's like, so we know what eating is. Eating. The concept of eating. This is a gracious God. There didn't need to be any flavors in the world. There didn't need to be any taste buds and then flavors. Totally unnecessary. Evolutionarily speaking, totally bogus, unhelpful, distraction. I mean, honestly, shouldn't we all just be green and just kind of stand in the sun? There's a federal program, we're working on it. Stimulus money. It's going to work out great. But instead, you have the orange segment, and he pops it in his mouth, and that first time, the very first time, the membrane broke. That's grace. Does it need to be like that? Is there kindness there that is deserved? No. The smell of a parking lot right when the rain starts. It's like, does it need to be like that? It's like, no. And how long did it take us to even discover that? It's like, what did it smell like when it was a Roman road? Did they get this? Or is this something we didn't get until we figured out the whole tar and gravel thing? Because this was worth it. I mean, right there, completely worth it. Peanut butter. Peanut butter and chocolate. Much better. As Colbert said to Dawkins, if there is no God, how did that peanut butter get in my chocolate? And Dawkins said, it's not a joke. Light sensitivity, light. What is this? A wave or a particle? Who knows? It's zipping around pretty fast, though. And it hits me right here. Like it bangs into these balls I have where I've got these little membranes. I can go bloop and re-moisturize, bloop and re-moisturize. Just so I can look around and have it keep hitting me. And then this molten rock turns a little bit more. It's like, oh, the lights went off. I think I should hold still. Sleep after work. By design, is there any reason why we should have that? The sensation of true collapse after hard labor, after faithful labor. No, there's no necessity. That is grace. Intestines, grace. Animal intestines. For a long time, we didn't know how to do, synthetic casings. There would have been no sausage. None. Zero. Never invented. But some butchers were standing there saying, well, and they found the will of God. Look around. Listen up, hobbits. Look around. Hear his voice, see his work, read and see his personality always. Grace is not like the discovery that ranch seasoning in meat on a barbecue goes well together. It's not like that. That is grace. Taste buds, sight, the sense of touch, the sensation of arms slapping on a rib cage after a strong hug, kids laughing, the weird little caricature that they are these miniature people with oversized heads and kind of flat features. It's like their wonder and their awe. It's like all this is grace. Yes, common. It's common grace. Common, what a crappy name. Common grace. It's like that's, yes, it means it's for everybody. Yes, I understand that, so it's true. I don't object to it in that sense. But common? It's like, well, unfortunately, it's led us to believe that it's common. It's not common. It's amazing. It's marvelous. All of it is out of this world. It absolutely is. Listen up to all of it. Smell what he gives you to smell. Feel it. Drink it. Taste it. Love it. Listen to him, and then imitate his personality. Listen, hear, see, imitate. Grace is that cereal in the morning. Grace is the sun shining. Grace is photosynthesis, which was completely unnecessary, but fun. Grace is the fact that gravity actually works. Grace is the fact that this is still above our heads. It's like, why is it still standing? Because he's still holding it. Grace is all of those things. Grace took a thief and gave him a really nasty little story, a dark story, and he ended up crucified. Crucified by whom? Grace is AIDS that calls somebody to Christ. Grace is that car wreck. Grace is the earthquake. Grace is all of those things. This world is his. This world is his art. This world is God's narrative. This is his spoken creation in the now, before the foundation of the world, and in every second since that time. This is his world. This is his personality. This is his gallery and his library, and we should be as desperate as we can be to fit as much of it into us as we possibly can, and to look at him as often as we can, to try to be like him as much as we can. This is a fantasy world full of laughter and jokes, and darkness, seriousness and joy, and we should walk out of our houses in the morning not like thoughtful intellectuals, not like people who've affirmed something. We should walk outside our houses like Cajuns with a lip full of dip going out to hunt alligators. So we're going to get some big alligators today. Yes, we is. Yes, sir. Yes, we is. Grace is that kind of joy. Seeing him and understanding him, being like him, reflecting him, just reveling in every bit of the story that he's given you. This world contra mundum. This world against every perception of the world that we have in the modern age, against atheism and agnosticism and theism and polytheism and all the sloppy cop-outs that we can come up with. This world is here it stands, and it can be no other, because God is who he is. And so there will be giraffes. I apologize if it offends you. There will be deep sea fish with street lamps. Yes. There will be giant earthworms. Kittens will be kittens. Hawks will be hawks. The seas will do as the seas will do. And this planet, this ball of molten rock, will continue to whistle around that ball of fire in the sky. It will do those things because God is who he is. And the world can do no other than reflect him. Thank you.